And what's happening, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today live edition. Once again, it's the middle of the week. We're going live as often as possible here, leading up to NBA tip-off next Tuesday. I am Dan Vespers, and I am thrilled to be joined on this Wednesday morning here on the West Coast, the very early afternoon where my good friend Zain Dhanani is checking in. Zain, first of all, where are you? I know you're on Central Time, but I didn't get the exact location. And how you doing? Welcome to the program.
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. So I'm actually in Chicago right now. So I'm on that Central Time, always trying to adjust to whatever time, you and the rest of the guys, Vince and Aaron, all want to meet and talk and stuff. But excited to be on and excited to give some advice to some of these other people that are interested in hearing what we've got to say.
Well, I just had a slight glitch there. I want to make sure that everything is A-OK here as we get this thing rolling. Zane, can you still hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so just a very 2 or 3 second glitch as we open up this show. That's the way you want to do it. We are once again taking questions. That's what this week is all about. We are 6 days away from the start of the NBA season, which means that there are a lot of people with fantasy drafts coming up. I know I just had one this last weekend, part of a slow draft. I have one coming up on Friday evening. I have another one Monday night, the day before the NBA season starts. So I know I'm doing a lot of prep work myself. So please, if you have questions, get them in and we will address them here on this show. But before we kind of dig into the question side of things, Zane, I wanted to take maybe 5 minutes or so to kind of introduce you to the podcasting crowd because you're writing over at Hoopball. But this is, I don't know. I don't know if this is the podcast debut overall, but it's certainly your Fantasy NBA Today debut with me.
Right.
What's the background a little bit? How did you get into NBA writing and what brought you to Hoopball and what do you think are your areas of expertise for those that are drumming up some questions right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just start from the beginning here. So grew up playing, all of the fantasy sports growing up whenever I think I started when I was 11 years old or something like that. Always interested. My brother actually also writes for Hoopball, Zain Dhanani. But in general, started playing fantasy growing up. When I was in college, decided to start my own website, started writing about fantasy stuff there, doing some sort of analytics around the NBA, the MLB, and the NFL. After that, got an internship with ESPN in their stats and information department. So, comes up with those ridiculous numbers where, Carmelo Anthony scored 50 points for the 45th time, and that's the most ever by a Knicks player or something like that. So did an internship there. Decided to get into consulting and doing analytical consulting. So really right now in Chicago, I'm just doing things with numbers and basically trying to help companies solve problems with those numbers.
That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. I'm kind of a numbers guy myself, although I can't necessarily say that I've used them in that same capacity. I've always just kind of been fascinated with numbers and with maps. Is there any connection for you there? I love just looking at a map of a city and figuring out how everything connects to one another.
Yeah, I love doing that as well. I mean, part of my responsibilities here is to make visuals for companies and things as well. So those visuals are key to get across to different individuals, right? So, you're sitting there, you're looking at some numbers, but you want to see it kind of like displayed in a nice way.
Exactly. So we actually do have our first question coming in. We may actually bounce back and forth a little bit between talking about Zane and introducing you to the Fantasy NBA Today listeners and addressing questions that come in intermittently throughout the show. Tyler Braun writes the first question in the chat room. By the way, if you want to get your question answered, I'm going to do my best to monitor the Hoopball Twitter feed, my own personal Twitter feed. Zane, I think you'll probably be looking at yours, which, by the way, Zane and my own Twitter feeds are actually just our name. So that's it should be pretty easy, except we both have kind of odd names. So if you can find us, then you can follow us, and I highly recommend it for each of the two. But the easiest way to get us a question here on this program is to head to the YouTube link, the chat room, where a lot of you should be watching this program right now. And there is a chat window, for me at least, looking at a computer screen over on the right side. And we'll be watching that throughout the program as well. Tyler asks, who are a couple of guys going around pick 150 that you think could sustain top 75 value? Zane, some thoughts on that one? A pretty good first question coming in.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So here's a guy that I know that Aaron would definitely support as well. But I think Willie Cauley-Stein's one of those guys. He was drafted really highly. I think he was 7th pick last year's NBA draft. And playing for the Kings, that team always kind of starts to break down at the end, towards the end of the season, where they start playing their younger guys more, and Cousins gets in trouble, something else like that happens. I think he can step in there and provide value in some of those other categories. So when I say other categories, I mean not your points and your threes and such that everybody looks at, but I'm talking about steals. Right now in the preseason, he's averaging about 3 steals per game. Additionally, he can help out in blocks and rebounds and field goal percentage. So there's one guy. Dan, do you have a guy that you've been looking at?
My guy's not really a secret. Terrence Jones is the fellow that I've been looking at. He's pre-ranked right around 141. But for him, of course, it's always going to be about health. He only played, I think it was 50 games last year, and he just has issues staying on the floor, but he's still a super young guy, which even though he's been in the league for now 3 or 4 seasons, and we kind of have the same conversation every time, somebody's going to have to soak up some of those power forward minutes in New Orleans. And I know that at times they'll probably play Anthony Davis at the 4 when they go particularly large, but that's just not a sustainable 5-man on the court situation. Omer Ashik, or Ashik, depending on how he wants to pronounce this year, is not a guy that's going to be seeing big minutes. So they'll likely play Davis at the 5, which is going to open up minutes for a high-flying possible 3 or 4 guy like Terrence Jones. So if he can stay out there, if he can stay healthy, to me, he's a guy that does have top 75 upside just because of defensive numbers, the ability actually to mix in maybe a 3-pointer if he can actually knock a few of them down. He's a low turnovers guy. He should at least, with some relative efficiency from the field. Not a great foul shooter, but doesn't get to the line very often. And I know that he's a guy that's actually been coming off of boards earlier because people like us have been talking about him for a couple of weeks now. But he's still a guy that I'm looking at that you might be able to scoop up, maybe not in the last round of your fantasy draft, but certainly towards the mid-end portion of it. And I think he can put up some pretty good numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to throw out one other guy, just one more special guy for those of you out there. I was also thinking Cody Zeller. Last year, he had some playing time issues at the beginning of the season where Al Jefferson was playing. Jefferson comes back towards the end of the season. This year, he is the main guy. So right now, I think his ADP is around that 140, maybe 150 area. I'm thinking he might be able to take that jump into that top 75 as well. He will provide you rebounds. He's actually a good passer out of the post as well. And his field goal percentage will be really well. So you'll get those rebounds, you'll get the field goal percentage, and you might get lucky with some assists relative to other centers and power forwards in the league. So that's another guy that I think that can really make that leap this year.
Yeah, there are actually a handful of guys in that area that could put together decent seasons. 75 is a tough number. I don't know that any of these guys will actually hit that mark, but I think a lot of them, Zane, like you were mentioning, have the ability to be pre-ranked anywhere from 130 to 160, but end the year maybe closer to 90. That might be a more reasonable expectation, just because to get into that top 75, you really have to do something special and sustain it. So someone like a Mason Plumlee, he actually put together a pretty good season last year, and his numbers 9, 8, 3, almost a steal, a block a game, still only got him 151. So those are healthy numbers, but to do that over a long haul, to to be efficient enough in the other categories. And the thing certainly for Plumlee that weighed him down, not a good foul shooter. And he actually turned the ball over 2 times a game from the center position, which is kind of unusual for quote unquote low.
Yeah, that's a little unusual there.
Exactly. So he's a guy that could provide you something interesting in stats that you might be hunting, where he might not end up at top 75 value. So there's kind of a balancing act there, but hopefully some of those guys will Tyler lead you kind of in the right direction. There was actually a follow-up, by the way, Zane, to your mention of Willie Cauley-Stein. Roderick de Guzman says, would you drop Danny Green or Buddy Hield to pick up Willie Cauley-Stein? My thought on that is probably not.
Yeah, I don't think I would do that. That's a little too far. And I know that Aaron would do the same thing. He has a special place in his heart for Danny Green. Remember last year, he would write about it all the time. But no, I don't think I would do that. As we said, again, these are people we're picking here at the end of the draft, the tail end of the draft, and we're hoping are in the top 75, realistically in the top 90. But we're not dropping guys that you're drafting around 100, that 75 to 100 range. We're not dropping those guys right now before the season even starts to add a guy like Willie Cauley-Stein.
Yeah, a little bit, maybe jumping the gun just a little bit on that one. Scott with SKD Media actually asks a follow-up question on this same trend line as well. He says, it looks like right now Costa Koufos will be starting over Willie Cauley-Stein. He knows hoop ball, like you just mentioned, has a special place in their heart for the Kings. So wondering if you have any thoughts on how that minute breakdown shakes out.
Yeah, so honestly, I'm thinking that we'll see Willie Cauley-Stein in the 20s to mid 20s to lower 20s. So I'm thinking about 20 to 25 minutes per game. With that, he is still a very, very efficient player when he's out on the field. If you've noticed, he can get steals, he can accumulate very quickly. His field goal percentage will definitely not hurt you. He is a little bit negative in free throw percentage, so that might hurt you, but I don't think he's going to be getting to the line very often. So I still think that I would rather have Willie Cauley-Stein than Costa Koufos in a league, but yeah, he might not be starting right now, but in the future, I do expect him to take over that role.
Moving along. Very good first question and a lot of really nice follow-ups. That's how a good discussion gets going. So thank you to the folks in the chat room for interacting with us live on air. I hope, by the way, that I'm doing a decent enough job of following the thread as we talk. Giancarlo Parenti gets us started kind of in a new vein here. Needs keeper help. Standard 9-cat league. He's asking us to pick 4 from the following. And by the way, he said he's in win now mode, so something to keep in mind to this question. Draymond Green, Boogie, Jimmy Butler, Kemba Walker, Paul Millsap, Kyrie Irving, Devin Booker, Rudy Gobert, and Gorgui Dieng. So I don't know if you can remember all the names I just listed off, but he needs to pick 4 of them in a keeper in win now mode. So 2 of those actually are kind of what would you even call it? They're sort of working opposed to one another, because in a keeper league, first thought is who's going to have the longest term value, but in win now mode, maybe holding on to a guy is not as relevant.
Yeah, so this is a really tricky question. I agree. For me, though, I don't think there's any dispute saying that I think I would definitely keep Millsap. I think his usage rate is going to go up a lot this year. Because Horford's gone, I would definitely keep him no matter what. I know he's kind of getting older and everything, but I would definitely keep him. Others that I would definitely keep in mind, I'm always worried about Kyrie Irving's injury history. I'm always worried about whether or not he's going to be rested or not. So because I do expect Cleveland to be one of the top teams again this year. So I don't think I would keep him. But Kemba Walker is another guy that has had some explosive games here in the preseason. I know he's coming off the knee injury. but he is a guy that I expect to do really well this year. I know that he's getting drafted at near the end of the second round. I would say take him in the middle of the second round, for those of you listening for other purposes other than keeper league.
It's always worthwhile information. That's good stuff.
Right. Just to comment on Draymond Green, I expect him to have the lowest value of all four of the Warriors this year. I think that his usage is going to drop the most with Kevin Durant being inserted into that offense. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times you would see Draymond Green act as the second facilitator in that offense, and I think that role is going to be taken over by Kevin Durant this year. So I just expect his usage to go down. What that means is really the assists, some of the points, all of that kind of stuff is going to drop a little bit, the threes. So he's not a guy that I'd be looking to keep. But then I see Boogie here, and I see Booker and Gobert and Gorgie. So my take on those guys, Devin Booker, just extremely, extremely talented player. Definitely a lot of comparisons to Klay Thompson. But for me, if I'm trying to save up for just this year, I would take Boogie over Booker, and then I would probably stick with Gobert over Booker in this scenario as well.
All right,
what are your thoughts?
I kind of lost track of who the final four were in that one.
Yeah, so let me just sum that up. So we got Kemba, we got Millsap, we got Boogie, and Gobert.
Kemba, Millsap, Boogie, and Gobert. I love Boogie of the four that you just said. He's definitely in there. I'm a huge Paul Millsap fan. He's a guy that I'm targeting in pretty much all of my leagues, be they head-to-head or roto. He should have himself a truly massive year with Horford no longer around him. And, I think maybe rebounding comes down a little bit just because of the pairing up front down in Atlanta. But, he's going to be doing an awful lot of facilitating. And, Millsap's just an across-the-board stats guy, so I love that too. I think that your take on Draymond Green is brilliant, and it's something that people are not thinking about. He's a guy whose value peaked last year when people drafted him a little bit lower, and he put together a monster of a season. Now folks are drafting him a little bit higher, and he's actually slated to drop back a little bit. So be careful in that respect. So yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that front. Not as great a long-term outlook from the keeper side, from the win now side as well. He's probably not your best bet either. I guess my question is, for a keeper league, usually these are going to be guys that occupy a particular round of your draft going forward. So right. I don't know if there's anything to be said about what rounds Giancarlo is losing by keeping some of these guys, because I have to assume that Devin Booker is a guy that if you had him from last year, keeping him probably took a late round draft pick away from you, maybe your very last one, but he's now obviously going much earlier in this 2016-17 draft. So if we just ignore the rounds for now, win now mode is probably Boogie, Kemba Walker, Paul Millsap, and then I would sort of flip a coin between Jimmy Butler and Rudy Gobert, depending on what you need on your team at that point.
Right, and I think just to add to that, I think that there are more guards than elite centers out there, and that might also kind of change the way that I was thinking a little bit. So, I did go with three guys that are probably eligible for center as well, with Millsap and Boogie and Gobert, and that kind of shifts the way that I'm thinking as well, because I think that you can find value at the guard and at the guard positions.
Yeah, I agree. Particularly shooting guard and small forward. There's a billion of those guys out there. Not as many true point guards these days, and not as many true centers. So if that plays into the mix a little bit as well. But of course, that's the dichotomy here for Giancarlo, who asked the question, who's worried about keeping, but also worried about trying to win at this exact moment. So that's two things kind of working, butting heads with one another, and you have to reconcile it somehow. and hopefully Zane and I were able to give you some of our top guys for winning this year.
Right.
We got a question actually coming in via Twitter, so I'm going to jump over there for just a minute. It's our buddy Ball who asked a couple of questions yesterday, and he has a few today. So let me see if I can rattle them off.
All right. Who's our buddy this time? What's his name again?
He's J-Ball on
J-Ball. Okay.
Twitter. I don't believe he's listening live, but he does listen to the show after the fact, and hopefully his question will apply to some of the other folks that are tuning in and watching the program live. And by the way, thank you to everybody who's been really ramping up over the last couple of weeks and joining us for these live programs. Please click the subscribe button on your YouTube page. Give us a thumbs up if you like us. Give me a thumbs down if you think I'm ugly. And we'll go back to you won't have to look at our faces anymore.
I don't want to know if I'm ugly. Please don't do that to me. That's what all of those social media apps are for. Those Tinder and Grindr and Bumble and all those other things. I don't need to know about that on here.
This is completely unrelated to our fantasy basketball discussion, but I actually just learned that there's an app out now called After School, which was designed specifically for high schoolers to post anonymous comments about one another. Can you even imagine a worse idea? That may be the worst idea for an app of all time.
Yeah, we actually had that in college as well, actually. It was called College ACB or something like that, and you would just basically write about different people that you've met in college and basically just talk crap about everybody. So
yeah, that's horrible. Did it tag the people that you were talking about? I think that's one of the other aspects.
No, that wasn't it. We weren't advanced enough then, but now I think it is advanced enough to where you can tag people on whatever you want.
There were not apps when I was in college. We were using Napster and we were taking music from one another. So I'm dating myself just a little bit there, but anyway, that just seems like the worst idea on earth, and you're gonna have high schoolers crying themselves to sleep every darn night. Anyway, J-Ball, he thanked us for the help yesterday. So to Vince, if you're out there, J-Ball says thank you. He says he's got another one today. 9-cat Roto 12 team picking third. Steph or KD? Why? Like really? Why? And I'm reading that verbatim.
That's great.
But I gotta ask though, Zane, would you even expect Steph to fall to somebody in the third pick?
Actually, I definitely do. I think that people are a little scared based off of, the past history of all of these kind of super teams that you've seen in the past 10 years or so, with the Heat and then the Cleveland Cavs, and then now you've got the Golden State Warriors building a big four instead of a big three in comparison. But I think people are scared that they won't just hit it off immediately. The thing is, though, we've seen them in preseason. Right now, actually, preseason ranks based off of their stats in preseason. Durant is number 1. I think Klay Thompson is in the top 5, and Curry's in the top 15. So I wouldn't expect that much to drop off. In fact, I think that some of those Warriors players are going to be hitting these efficiency numbers that are just astronomical. I'm talking about Klay being in the 55% range shooting because open all the time and he can make anything anyway when someone's in his face. So for me, circling back to the question, for me in that third pick, I am expecting people to stay safe and go with the two guys that are going to have the highest usage in the NBA with Russell Westbrook and Harden. That's what I would expect for the first two picks. I don't necessarily agree with it. So that third pick for me would be Kevin Durant. And
so in a Roto league, you think that Westbrook would actually go ahead of the Warriors in a? I could see it happening in a head-to-head league where popcorn win you a week, but in Roto, Westbrook. Some of those.
There's a lot that goes into it, and I think that another thing is that people are thinking that this Warriors team is going to go out there and compete for 70 games again, and if they are they going to try to go after it? I don't think they will, because they made that mistake last year. Are they going to rest their players? So how many games are you actually getting out of a guy as opposed to a guy like Westbrook, who will be in the playoff race, going after, they'll be going after one of those seeds in the West, one of the bottom seeds in the West, and are they going to be going? Westbrook is going to be going balls to the wall, always trying to play those 82 games. So that I think that's the other thought there, is that you're getting a guy with one of the highest usage rates in the league, and you're also getting a guy that will try to play all 82 games. And I think the same goes for Harden. You're going to get a guy that's doing just about the same there.
Yeah, I think between those two guys, I would definitely lean hard to the Beard, mostly because of his work from the perimeter.
From deep. Yeah.
I mean, that's a big leg up. So I could see Harden going ahead of the Warriors guys. The Westbrook thing does surprise me a little bit, because I mean, with him on the ball, he could quite literally average 6 turnovers a game this year. And to me, in a head-to-head league, that's not an issue, because on a week-to-week basis, that number will fluctuate, where you're going to be getting astronomical numbers in points and rebounds and assists and steals. He's going to be at the foul line a bunch. His efficiency from the field won't really be that big of an issue, again, in a head-to-head league. So anyway, kind of getting back to J-Ball's original question, because you and I both we ended up in a side question that I still think actually is maybe relevant enough for folks in any league. So KD over Steph at the third spot, is that because you feel like his efficiency is going to be better than Steph? Is it because of the blocks and the rebounds over Curry's assists and steals? What is it that puts one of those guys ahead of the other for you?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think that KD was any better than Steph last year or anything. There's no question. Steph was the best player in the league last year, during the regular season at least. But I do think that year 2, coming off the foot injury that he had, I think he's going to feel a lot more comfortable at the beginning of the season. And towards the end of the season was when Kevin Durant started taking that throne as maybe he's the better player at the end of the season. Now, what I think is going to happen when by joining this team, is that he will be the guy he will be like the face of the franchise. And I think that a lot of people disagree, but I think that he's going to be the face of the franchise. I think he is more natural in that role as MVP. He's won it before, and obviously Steph's won it as well, but I think that he's going to be the guy that steps up and is the best player on that team. And I think we're going to see that this year, early on, actually. And in preseason, we've been seeing that too. We've been seeing Kevin Durant as the number 1 fantasy guy in preseason. So I'm not as worried. I also think that he contributes in pretty much every category across the board as well.
So then the follow-up question, also from J-Ball, is, depending on who we picked from his initial question, which for you was Durant, and I'm actually leaning Curry a little bit in that one, who would we pair in rounds 2 and 3? I have a very simple answer to this question.
Go for it.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Don't pick your second and third rounders based exclusively on who you got in the first round. This is still a spot in the draft where you should be thinking about taking the best player available, and you can kind of fill out needs through the middle rounds more so than the first couple. So if certain guys are still available when they get to you and they happen to play the same position, say, as Steph Curry, let's say that someone who's a point guard or a shooting guard that you really want,
like Kemba Walker. Or
exactly. So that's my answer on that one. If you took Durant, don't feel bad about taking another guy who's going to be a high efficiency 3-point shooting scoring machine and isn't a center or something like that. You take the guy that's the best available. Once you get towards rounds 5 through 8, you start to think about what maybe you need to shore up a little bit. But I wouldn't worry too much about pairing at least that early in a draft. Right.
I agree. I don't think that you should be worrying about that that early in the draft. Try to tailor your team maybe around the first 3 picks you get. If you're not drafting a specialist in those first 3 picks, you're drafting guys that are going to be pretty much the number 1 or 2 player on their team, and that can contribute in multiple categories. So when you get into that round 4 through maybe like 8, you're going to be getting guys that can probably contribute in 2 or 3 categories, and then later on in the draft, you might be drafting guys that are either potential or just helping in one category, like blocks or something else like that. So I wouldn't tailor your team to one specific thing that early in the draft.
Yeah, completely agree. So if you have Steph Curry in the first round, don't avoid 3-pointers for the next 2 rounds. That's
now. If we're talking head to head, it's completely different. Roto, we're trying to get the most points in every category, and head to head, you're trying to win. You're trying to win more categories than the opponent. So, if you do get a guy like, actually, if you get a guy like Kevin Durant, you might not. He fills out pretty much every category, so you don't really need to tailor your second pick to what Kevin Durant does. You can pretty much pick anybody. With Steph, it's a little bit different, but his value in those categories that he does well in is so far above the value that anyone else does. So I'm talking about three-pointers. Like, his three-pointers are so much higher than pretty much anybody else in the league. And the efficiency that comes with it, shooting over 50%, that comes with it, with the free throws, everything like that. You're getting a guy that's so far and ahead above everybody else in some of those categories, especially when you're comparing to position, that you can then supplement the other positions, or the other categories that you aren't hitting on.
Yeah, and one other thing to think about, too, with a guy like Steph Curry, he gets tons of credit for the three-point barrage, and he should, but he also averaged 5.5 rebounds, almost 7 assists. He was 4th in the league in steals last year. He's a 91% free throw shooter and got to the line 5 times a game. So really the only thing that you're missing from a top 3 pick like that is blocks. He's not blocking anybody.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess in a head-to-head league, if you ended up with Steph Curry, maybe that's a point where you say, you know what, I'm going to target guys in the next couple of rounds that also are not really that proficient in blocks, but great at every other stat. But, yeah, certainly.
Even then, in that scenario, you're going to get a guy that, he might not be getting any blocks, but is he getting very many blocks compared to everybody else's point guard? Probably not. He's probably just about average. And later on in the draft is where you target those specialists. So if you don't get a guy that's, getting blocks in the first round, that means that you can target that block category later on by getting a guy like Bismack Biyombo, who might get 2 or 3 blocks a game. So, you can supplement it how you want. I think especially if you're drafting in the top, maybe like 5 picks, if you're in a head-to-head, that you can probably draft anybody in the second round and not have to tailor your team around one certain category or anything, or a couple of certain categories or anything like that.
Tommy Simmons, we're moving along. The next pick coming back from the chat room again. Could you please give me stat projections for Dario Saric and Jahlil Okafor?
Sure. I will take Jahlil Okafor first. So right now, coming back off the injury and everything, interestingly enough, he's not a guy, even though he's a big man, he's not a guy, he's kind of like Brook Lopez in that he doesn't go out there and grab a ton of rebounds for the position that he's in, especially playing the minutes that he plays. He's more of a scorer. So, I think that he's going to be highly efficient with his field goal percentage. He's going to get you a lot of points. I'll put some projections around those. Let's say, 16 to 17 points per game. I think he was around that same number last year. But he's not going to get you as many rebounds as you would expect. So my expectation there in the rebound category would probably be somewhere around 6 to 7. They have a lot of big guys that they're going to be splitting minutes with, so I don't expect him to play, in that mid 30 range like you would maybe see in another season, because they're getting Embiid back, and then they also have Nerlens as well. So I'm thinking about 16 to 17 points, 6 to 7 rebounds, maybe a block per game, and very few assists, maybe one assist per game, with probably about 55% field goal percentage, and his free throw percentage will probably remain about the same at about 70. So I'm not thinking that there's going to be too much of a difference this year from I don't think he's going to grow that much this year based off of what he did last year, probably because his playing time might not be as high as last year. What do you think?
Completely agree. That was an easy one. So I want to take a moment here. I was sort of half watching the chat room to make sure that everything was getting addressed. And Jason Rojas says he has his draft in 45 minutes. So I'm actually going to bump his question up a tiny bit.
All right.
Before I do that, Zane, I didn't want to cut you off. Were there any other thoughts on Tommy's question before we move to Jason's?
Yeah, I'm not going to give full stat projections for Saric. I mean, it's kind of hard, but he's a jack of all trades, and that's what we've seen in his EuroLeague stats. We're kind of seeing that here in the preseason. I think he will. I think he will outproduce his ADP, and I think that most of Hoopball also agrees with that. That he will be, maybe a top 75 player this year. I think he's getting drafted somewhere in the hundreds right now. So.
Very good. Jason, you have the 9th pick in a 15-team league. Who is a solid second-round pick? So I guess that would be pick 21, if I'm doing my math correctly.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up a chart here right now to see what pick that is, but yeah, I think that's correct actually.
So that's right around the 20 to 25 window. So, Jason, it'll actually depend, of course, a little bit on who's off the board before you. But guys that I've been looking at least, if you want to call it the beginning of the 3rd round in a 10-team league, are not really big surprises. If Kemba Walker falls that far, that would be one that I'd really like to get at 21. If Al Horford falls that far,
can they guess
there?
Sorry, can they guess that we all love Kemba Walker here? I mean, I feel like I've mentioned him like 4 times so far today. So,
I guess if there are guys that maybe are a little farther down that you could think about grabbing a little early, John Wall is Yahoo ranked at 26. I wouldn't mind taking him at 21. Klay Thompson is pre-ranked at 29. I think he could easily be 21 by the end of the season. I don't see anybody really lower than Klay Thompson that I'm all that excited about lunging for, at least thinking that they'll be basically a top 20 guy. But certainly, for me at least, those are the guys right around that area where I'd be looking to pick them up. But again, there may be guys that get passed over. There may be some reaching that goes on. I have a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth with Kyle Lowry because of his late season flops the last couple of years. But he was the number 8 guy in all of fantasy sports when he was on the floor. So again, if he falls that far, it might be one of those situations where I just have to block out my own memory and a guy that I would take around 21. So those at least the guys that jump out to me. The guys around that area that I probably wouldn't want all that badly around the 20th pick in a draft, Draymond Green, as Zane just mentioned a moment ago, should see a bit of a step back this year. Even if his shooting percentage comes up a little bit, he's just not going to be the same focal point. I'm not a massive fan of Kyrie Irving because of the injury history. I'm a little bit worried, by the way, about Kristaps Porzingis in his second year with all those weird new pieces in New York around him. I think he could very easily be a top 15 guy, but there's something about it that shakes my nerves a little bit. And maybe that was more helpful than who I would take, but that's who I wouldn't really. Zane, your thoughts on that area of a draft?
Yeah, I think we touched on this guy earlier, but Paul Millsap is another guy that I would definitely want to get right there. I'm not sure if he'd be available. His ADP right now for 9 category leagues is 18, and his ADP for 8 category leagues is 21. So just about that range where you would definitely want to jump on him. Another guy I think I would probably want to take at that spot in 8 category leagues, Jimmy Butler right now is going at pick 20. If he's available, I would snag him. He has, I know he got injured last year, but I think he should be all right this year. And I think a guy that if you are trying to target a point guard and there's not very much out there anymore, and you're trying to get a guy that I still think will be in the top 21, but may or may not be a guy that you would want to pick exactly at that spot would be this is a real big surprise, but I think Isaiah Thomas is going to be a top 20 player this year as well.
Who would you not take around that area of a draft?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually do like Kristaps Porzingis as well. That was a guy that you said you didn't like. I like Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, for me, it's a scare thing. It's not that I don't think he's going to produce. There's just something about it that makes me nervous that he's going to miss 20 games.
Yeah, I completely understand that. Some guys that I probably wouldn't take around there, LaMarcus Aldridge. I'm not too fond of him, and I think there was a note yesterday about the Spurs potentially wanting to trade him. Um, he's on that minutes protection plan that the Spurs offer and Greg Popovich offers. So I don't really know if you're getting great value out of him because you don't know how many minutes he's going to play and how many games he's going to play in a season based on the way that they've treated their players in the past. And then Kyrie Irving's another guy that's scary. I think he got hurt yesterday and had to leave the game for a little while. I don't remember if he checked back in or not, but um, he's another guy that I'm about. And just to give another name of a guy that I would probably target there, Al Horford. I like Al Horford this year. I think on Boston he will in the pick and roll with Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas is known for his pick and roll game. That's what he's good at. He's going to thrive in that because he can also pop out to the 3-point line, shoot some deeper shots, and then he can also go in and make those fun post plays and grab boards and all of that. So
Very good. Jason, your follow-up questions here. He says, I'm going to get Boogie or Whiteside with the 9th pick in the first. How would one structure a team with those guys in mind? If Oladipo or Jokic are still available at next pick, who would we choose between the two? So I'm going to try to keep this answer on the shorter side just so we can make sure we hit the last one or two questions before wrapping this thing up on our fine little Wednesday morning program. Again,
yeah,
Jason, my first thought is I wouldn't really try to structure the team in the second round based off of Boogie or Whiteside. Like Zane was saying on an answer to a previous question, it's a little too early to be looking for a 1 or 2 category guy. So take the best player available and worry about structure a little bit later on. Between Oladipo and Jokic, my personal pick, and I'm the safe play guy, I think, at Hoopball, is Oladipo because I think you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to get out of Victor. You don't know quite the quantity of it, but you know what he does. Jokic was just kind of coming into his own, and everybody has an idea of what he's capable of, but he hasn't fully done it yet. So between those two, Jokic may be the slightly higher ceiling, but Oladipo, for me, the higher floor. And early in a draft, I'm usually taking guys that have a higher floor. So, Zane, those two questions, structure-related question after a Boogie or Whiteside pick, and the debate between Victor and Nikola.
yeah. So if you are structuring your team, you're going to take Nikola. I think is it Nikola? Is it Nikola? I can't remember off the top of my head right now.
The Joker.
I would take the Joker. If you're trying to structure your team, I think I would take him no matter what, actually. And then Victor Oladipo, just a side note for him. If you guys don't remember last year, at the beginning of the season, Skiles was really playing games with his lineups there for Orlando, and Oladipo was frequently the guy that would not be in the lineup, or not starting at least, and playing 25 minutes and such like that. So you're actually getting a guy that you know is going to play 35 minutes this year instead of last year where you're getting a guy that's playing 25 and then 30 and then sometimes 15, just depending on what Skiles was feeling at the moment. So you're not getting that this year, just to clarify for everybody. But even so, I think that I'm going to take the riskier pick and take Jokic. I have him ranked around 15 on my list. And, we saw a lot of it last year. And last year there wasn't Nurkic to take away from some of the production and things of that nature. But I do expect this Denver team to play really, really fast, more possessions, and that means more fantasy production. That doesn't mean that OKC won't play that way, but I think that being a supplemental player to Russell Westbrook and not being an actual star player in this league means something completely different for Oladipo. He's going to be getting all the defensive stats in the world because they're going to put Westbrook on the second guard because they want Oladipo to spend his energy on defense. Jokic is going to be a huge player in this very fast Denver offense. I'm expecting him to contribute in a lot of categories, including threes. I know he was hitting some last year. Rebounds. He should get about 10 a game. If you're going for points, I wouldn't. If you draft Whiteside, you're probably not going for points as much. Probably the better pick for him, but that's just my 2 cents.
And that's why things are. This is interesting. I mean, but you can see different styles. There's a lot of different ways to win in a fantasy league, and for me, lower risk early on, but lower reward. And I'm just always confident that if there's something that I need to change later on, I can do it. But I love to have those guys that I just know exactly what's about to happen. We got time for 2 more questions on this thing. I'm going to combine one of the a 2-parter into one. And I also want to dial the clock back a little bit because Edan asked a question about 20 minutes ago, and we sort of bounced around it for one of our listeners who had a draft coming up. But Edan says, would you pick 3 Golden State Warriors in a 12-team, 9-category Roto League? Curry, Dre, and Clay in picks 3, 22, and 27. And I think this one may be a quicker one for us, Zane, because we've already talked about a lot of these guys. He says if Durant misses time, it's a real party, but it's basically what you saw last year in that spot because, it's not like Harrison Barnes was sucking a bunch of the points away from the other 3 guys. So for me, and I get the feeling that you're probably in a similar boat, Curry at 3, yes. Heck yes. Draymond at 22? Yeah, maybe if he falls that far, actually, I would think about it, but I'm seeing him going a lot of second rounds this year. And Clay at 27, absolutely. So mine is a yes, a maybe, and a yes to the 3 of them, but certainly Curry and Clay, you'll never have to worry about a 3-pointer again in your life.
That's true. I would take Curry at 3. I think that's a fine pick for 3. You can make a conversation around him being 1 through 4, probably. I think anyone can make a conversation. There's a clear top 4, and he's within that. So that's easy. Pick 22, taking Draymond Green. I'd actually switch these guys. I'd probably take Clay 22 and Dre 27 if available. Obviously, his ADP is a lot higher, so you're probably not going to be able to get Draymond at 27, but I would him at 27. But Klay Thompson is the guy I'd rather have than Draymond Green. So if Draymond Green were off the board at 22, I would take Klay. If they were both on the board, I would take Klay there if I wanted another Warrior.
We may still be able to squeeze in 2 more questions. I lied when I said 2. It's going to be 3 total from our last check-in. Sorry, Tama, we're going to jump over your question just for a moment. Miguel de Guzman, he actually asked this question right at the tail end of the show yesterday, and we didn't have a chance to get to it, Vince and myself. Miguel asks, will Andrew Wiggins develop defensive stats this year? Zane, I will bow to you first on this one, and then I'll follow up if I feel like I need to add anything.
Yeah, the short answer for me is yes. I think he's actually going to develop quite a good defensive game. I think coming out of college, the reason why everyone liked him so much more than Jabari Parker was because of his defensive prowess. Lockdown defender, he has those attributes. He's so athletic. I think that Thibodeau coaching this year is really going to change that culture as far as how they play defense goes. I think that you're going to see him averaging around 1.5 steals, maybe even hit that 2 steal range. And a lot of that doesn't just have to do with the fact that, Thibodeau is changing the culture there, but also the fact that Thibodeau doesn't have any regard for how many minutes he's playing his guys. So you're going to see Wiggins in there playing 38, 40 minutes at times. Maybe even hit. I could see it where he's playing a full game at times too, just because that's the way Thibodeau rolls. So yes, I do think his defensive stats are going to go up. I think you can assume that his steals will be about 1.5 and hope that it gets to about 2. For blocks, I mean, he's a guard and a small forward, so you're going to be hoping for somewhere around half a block per game. And I think that he can get to that point as well, especially with his athleticism.
So I'm sort of with you on this one. I think that in looking at his numbers last year, what may surprise a few people is that his defensive stats were not that horrible. He did average a steal a game last year, and he averaged 0.6 blocks per game. So if you're getting 1.6 combined in the two defensive categories, it's not great, but it's not awful. There are plenty of guys that are lower than that. For instance, Klay Thompson, 0.8 steals, 0.6 blocks per game last year. So that, there's the perceived and then there's the actual. So yes, I think I agree with you in the notion that the defensive numbers may come up a little bit, but they were already okay. So I'm looking at maybe more in the neighborhood of 1.2 to 1.3 steals. I think the blocks probably stay around 0.6 per ball game because he is still young and he's willing to get a leaping fly swat block once every couple of ball games.
Yep.
What has weighed Wiggins down over the last couple of seasons is that he doesn't rebound, he doesn't really pass, and he hasn't shot the three. And on top of that, and this is the odd one really, he's a 76% foul shooter 7 times a game, which is basically neutral, but he's locking you into that number pretty hard. So yes, the short answer is defensive stats probably do come up just a tiny bit, but unless those other things come up, the stuff that's been weighing him down the last few years, you're still looking at a guy that, to me, at 44, which is where Yahoo has him pre-ranked, that's still too high for me. I'm not there with him yet. I think it's somewhere in between where he finished last year and where folks are expecting him to show up this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tamakar is going to be our last question for this program because we've now hit kind of the 9-minute warning. By the way, I want to thank everybody that's watching right now. I think we have officially hit our highest any one-time viewership on Fantasy NBA today. We're chasing down the night show, Zane. That one's got the bigger viewership right now just because I think people are off work and it's easier probably to watch the YouTube. Or it's possible that, again, it's my ugly mug and people would rather just look at Vince all the time.
That might be true, too.
Yeah, I fall into that boat. He's a handsome young man. But yes, thank you. Make sure to click that subscribe button just below the video. Give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying what we're doing. We're going to have, of course, more live shows coming up. I'll be back on tonight with the evening program. Vince is busy today. I'll be joined by Jordan Smith for that one. Tomorrow, Vince will be back with me on the Fantasy NBA Today 11 o'clock show. That'll be live again. And then John Sill will be with Vince tomorrow night. So that's the next 3 shows coming up. Also really excited. We're going to have a taped program with our buddy, The Welsh. He's going to be coming over. We'll do a little crossover episode that'll probably be released either at the end of this week or at the beginning of next. Last question here. So apologies to those that might be chiming in here at the very end of our program. But Tama's been waiting very patiently, and it's a 2-parter. How early do you stash Chris Middleton in the season, if at all? And Terrence Jones is my only power forward who is a good grab off the waiver wire. So I'm going to answer the first one pretty quickly, and my answer is don't. He's expected to miss pretty much the entire season, and even if he does come back, he won't be at full strength. So avoid Chris Middleton unless you get some sort of news in the last week of March that he's just raring to go and you got a spot to kill. I wouldn't do anything in the next 5 months from today. On the second question of that, Zane, I'm going to turn this one over to you. Terrence Jones is the only power forward, which it sounds like Tama picked him up probably towards the tail end of a draft. Who do you think's probably still floating out there that Tama can pick up that would fill that need?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Yahoo owned percentages right now, and I'm seeing Cody Zeller at 16%. I think that's a guy that you can pick up if available. There's also Larry Nance, who might be available. Cody Zeller I already talked about earlier, but I'm thinking he could have a top 90 season. I know I said top 75 before, but I think to me, it's almost a guarantee that he'll be in the top 90 if he doesn't get hurt. The next guy I said was Larry Nance. I think he's going to have a role again this year, a big role with the Lakers this year. I think he can provide you maybe a top 120 value there. So he's another guy that I'm targeting. I know he's owned about 34% right now. If I had to reach a little deeper,
would you think about Markieff Morris in this spot? Is he going to play enough to be a relevant power forward?
Yeah, Markieff Morris, to me, yes, I think he's great at that spot. I mean, the thing is for him, he's already owned 71% in Yahoo leagues.
Really?
So,
That number surprises me.
yeah. So to me, I'm kind of just skipping over guys that are ranked that have over 50% ownership right now. But I am looking at the ownership percentages at the same time as trying to talk here. But Alex Len, another stash that I think that he will have a role this year. Even though Tyson Chandler's back, I think that he'll have a good role this year as well. He's a guy that you might be able to find. Again, these guys might be eligible for center and power forward, but they are, as you said, eligible for power forward.
Here's my
And then another.
here's my
Sorry,
big reach.
go ahead.
I'm gonna drop my big time reach on for power forward once you're done. So that's that my ridiculous idea is coming in just a minute. I'll let you
absolutely.
Before I embarrass myself.
No problem. And then another guy that I'm looking at is Amir Johnson. We've seen him in this kind of role where he's not playing 30 minutes a game pretty much his whole career. He's always been around 20 to 25, and I expect the same this year. I expect him to continue to stay in that range where he's about a top 120 player. So he's another guy that I think that you can go after and be comfortable picking up.
So my crazy reach at the very end is Brandon Wright in Memphis. He's been sort of off the map for a year and a half, but people may have forgotten that he is the magician of efficiency if he can play 18 minutes a ball game. And I think he will this year see 18 minutes a game. He's going to be a guy that doesn't turn the ball over ever. He's probably going to shoot somewhere between 65 and 70% from the field in kind of limited numbers. Couple of points, couple of rebounds, and he can both swipe and he can block. So there's your guy at the way tail end that could actually be kind of an interesting little fill-in depending on who's hurt and who's playing in Memphis. So that's my grab at the tail end of the draft. Edan, by the way, mentioned that when one of the Warriors is out, it's kind of insurance for the other ones. But I don't think it's going to be happening enough where it's going to change the final numbers a great deal. I think that the idea of sort of the balanced days off is not necessarily a fallacy because that's too strong of a word. But if Steph Curry takes off one game a month, the slight bump that the other three guys get in that one game is not going to dramatically change their 82-game average on the year. So that, to me, is where you don't want to get too caught up in the idea of guys getting popped in Golden State. You bank that into the predictions going into the year, and that's why you don't want to make too many gigantic adjustments. So finishing her up now, I know, Zane, you got places to go and people to see coming up in the next couple of minutes, so I don't want to keep you too long. We are approaching the top of the hour, which means the show is coming to its conclusion. But Zane, a wonderful first weekly edition here for you. I hope you're ready to join us next Wednesday.
Absolutely. And just a quick note before I sign off, I want to say that Anthony Davis was practicing today. I want everyone to just know that so that they can feel comfortable potentially drafting him. He is an injury-prone risk, but just to give everyone a sigh of relief that he is actually playing right now.
There is no such thing as a sigh of relief with Anthony Davis. It just won't be done. Close your eyes. Pray, sacrifice a goat, whatever you got to do. I guess that's a Cubs relevant note right now. And enjoy. Again, I'll be back with Jordan tonight at 9 p.m. for Fantasy NBA Tonight. That'll be another live stream here. This broadcast will be packaged and put out through Hoopball, so if you missed the beginning, you can listen to it there via the recorded podcast iteration. He is Zain Dhanani. That's also where you can find him on Twitter. I'm Dan Vespers. Same deal. Hoopball Tweets is the website on Twitter. Hoop-ball.com is the website. Thanks again for listening in. Thanks for the questions. Thanks to Zane for joining us with some outstanding answers. And we'll be back with you in, 9 hours. It won't be too long at all. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care, everyone.